You can ask just about anybody around Miami Gardens these days, and they will tell you emphatically that there is a culture shift taking place with the Miami Dolphins. My question is, how much should we believe that you can really change it?
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network, today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers right now can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Who's buying a culture shift? That's the question for today. And we've heard from players this week at mandatory minicamp. We've heard from Mike McDaniel. We've heard from Tua Tagovailoa. We've heard from other team leaders, including Alec Ingold. Found out his nickname is the Hitman, which I think is outstanding. You can watch some Alec Ingold tape. You see some nice pops on guys. So love the nickname, finding that out this week as well. But Mike McDaniel has had some pretty heavy lift ahead of him and his coaching staff this offseason to try to change the temperament within the building with the Dolphins. And that's a delicate balance of who are you really as a person and as a coach and as a leader? And how do you stay authentic to who you are, which is one of the things that Mike has, through his first two seasons when the Dolphins had winning seasons and playoff berths, was applauded for. Now, I'll say this, having been at some not open to the public training camp practices, you've heard Mike a few times during my time down on the facility grounds get in his team's rear end a little bit. I've heard it happen, and I know it's not widely perceived to be who Mike is, and it's really not his style, but he was asked today about, how the coaches have had their hand in the culture shift, in part because Tua Tagovailoa, when talking about the shift and the temperature within the building, kind of alluded to it not just being a change in demeanor for the players, but also a change in demeanor for the coaches. The first thing that Tua was asked about the culture shift was Alec Ingold said, the chemistry this time around and the work ethic is much improved. Do you agree with that? I definitely agree with that. I think there's a culture shift. I feel just as much as anyone that's been here since I've gotten in the league. We always hear about, man, culture shift. You guys have a change of this. You guys are doing this, always optimistic. But I really do feel in my heart that there's a change of scenery for guys in the locker room. Then it also transitions to our coaches as well, because we get opportunities to lead, and it's not as much the coaches as it is the players, I would say, this year. Mike was asked about that question. I want to get more into what Tua is setting and get into it a little bit later in the show. But Mike was asked what the coaches are doing differently this year, and Mike alluded to some more direct feedback for the players, and then pointed to the individual players that are leaders and how they go about their process of calling players out and how it's okay to call players out. The full quote, which is not available on the Dolphins YouTube video of the presser because Mike drops an F-bomb in here, and this is a family-friendly show, so I won't tell you exactly what he says, but it's okay to be called out as a player as long as you change your expletive behavior. And this is one of those things that I've personally struggled with trying to wrap my head around, how successful you can be in being a player-led locker room, but also being a coach that can be more hands-on with discipline and expectations. And it's a lot to juggle, right? And I think it's going to be very telling for how this year plays out for Mike McDaniel, the leader of the Dolphins locker room. And if you're not a believer in Mike McDaniel, you'll probably sit here and roll your eyes, and that's fine. I'd like to get some proof of concept, and I'd like to see what it looks like, because I do believe if you have a locker room that has the right individuals that are in it, you can in turn be a locker room that's player-led. And you hear a lot about like the Florida Panthers um, or a player-led locker room that they have and heat culture. And heat culture's down a little bit right now, and I get that. But it's a lot easier when you have these smaller-sized rosters to be player-led teams as compared to when you're at 90, 92, 91 players on a football offseason roster. There's a lot more subsects and there's a lot more strain to get everybody moving in the right direction. There's a lot of, let's be honest, there's a lot of ego in the game of football. I've been to the Senior Bowl, right? And you go down to the Senior Bowl and every GM and coach and executive, and they're all in these rooms together, and everybody thinks that they can win and believes in themselves very passionately that they have what it takes. And in reality, there's only one team that wins the whole thing every year. So when you have that many human beings involved in the process, it's a harder proposition, and it really puts the onus on having the right temperature setters in the right places in the right rooms, and sometimes removing temperature setters that are turning the temperature up or down inappropriately and influencing other players on the team. So for being a team, as Mike McDaniel saying, it's okay to call out your teammates if you see behavior that needs to be correcting, and it's okay to be called out as a player on this team as long as you change your expletive behavior. You think about, go back to the Deshaun Elliott comments about the Dolphins and how he felt that they were a soft team. And Deshaun Elliott was a part of that safety/secondary room. The Dolphins gutted that position room this offseason. And you look back from 23 and ask yourself who's there, who's left from that group. I think your eyes will be open pretty wide to see just how much turnover there is. And maybe that's why some of those comments were made with who he was most often around. Now, you then have the pressure of getting all the other stuff right and finding the right players to bring in. But this goes back to talent allocation versus team building, right? And the Dolphins are in a team building phase and less of a talent allocation phase because they're coming off of several years in which they were very oriented in talent allocation first and foremost. So I don't know that Mike's going to do anything dramatically differently. I've heard some feedback that Mike's been a little bit more direct with what he wants and needs and would like to see from players this offseason, but nothing extreme. I've also heard Mike in years past in 22 and 23 jump down his team's throat at the end of a practice that wasn't sufficient. Like I've seen him do that, right? And I think you maybe saw a little bit of team meeting Mike McDaniel in this press conference that the Dolphins clipped the tail end of because they didn't want an F-bomb on their YouTube channel. So I don't think anything dramatically shifting is going to happen there. But you think about the return of a Bradley Chubb and the removal potentially of a Jalen Ramsey and some of the other players that are out. The team wasted very little time moving on from Odell Beckham when it became apparent just how much of an abject disaster that was. And from what I understand, there was a point last year early in the season where some of this kind of stuff popped up where the Dolphins had to have like a team leader player meeting to kind of talk about, hey, how do we get everybody to be a little bit more receptive to taking communication and constructive criticism and feedback from each other as teammates a little better. And the downside to something like turning over 40% of your roster is you have a lot of new faces. And if you have a power struggle as a player-led locker room of who are the voices that are going to serve as the leaders of the team, that can create some tension and some pull. Well, I think the Dolphins, obviously there's a lot of turnover this year, but the turnovers come with putting more role players and young players in those spots to not have some of the same leadership vacuum that people have a hard time accepting or falling into one right way to do it. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'd like to be overly abundantly clear on that. It's just giving my perspective on what I know about the struggles of last year and what we've heard publicly about the struggles from last year and what they're trying to do about it and how Mike's trying to go about it differently and do his part while still being true to who he is as a coach and the players and who's in and who's out and why maybe that's an influence on why they're moving on from some players that you might look at and say, yeah, you really need a player in that spot that we feel good about being a capable starter. All these pieces of this puzzle fit together, but not through the lens of, well, he's a 94 on Madden, so he's a good player. Right. Now, that means you're more vulnerable to if you have communication breakdowns or if you're just going to be outclassed from a talent perspective, you might be outgunned on a given week. Or it's on the pressure then falls back on the coaches to find the answers to make sure that you're not outgunned, or you have to play an unfavorable game script, which the Dolphins haven't done particularly well in recent years. A lot of questions, but we're going to get into a little bit more about what Tua Tagovailoa had to say about the matter. That's next here on Locked on Dolphins, so make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on all of the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways to play than ever to play smart and also to win big. For me personally, I got my eyes on tomorrow night with the Florida Panthers at home, favored by 1.5 goals in the Stanley Cup Finals, Game 4 against the Oilers, who just had a nuclear meltdown in Game 3. Just the softest mental performance of organization at any sport that I've seen ever. You can get the Panthers minus 1.5 for plus 160. I think the Oilers are going to melt, and therefore I'm taking the Panthers minus 1.5 for plus 160. I love those odds. And if you like free money, you can get some over at FanDuel. If your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel, you can get $200 in bonus bets. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com. Place that first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment worth FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Tua Tagovailoa asked about the culture shift a little bit more. If that's something that clicked, or how did that go about? And Tua said, and this kind of echoes some of the things that we just touched on a little bit, I think you have to have the right guys to be able to do that with. I think we have the right guys within the room, within the locker room, within the offense, and I know the guys on defense feel like they have their guys as well. For me, I think what's most important is I've been here for 5 years going on 6. Are you not tired of what we've done these past 5 years? If you are, then why aren't you doing anything about it? What do we have to change? What do we have to do to correct the navigation of where we want to go? I would say that's what it is. You create that standard in the locker room, the guys follow, and you've got to uphold it. So you come into work knowing that they are looking to you to uphold that standard. And if you don't, you've got to have it. You've got to have brought enough guys to hold you to that same standard as well. Just really gives the perception of a fractured locker room last year. And I've seen enough football to know that, yes, these things can be better from one year to the next. And they talk a lot about the intentionality. The Eagles last year started hot in 23 and faded down the stretch and finished 11-6. They were a hot mess express, and they got smoked in the wild card round of the playoffs. And Sirianni's on the hot seat, and A.J. Brown's getting all mad about how much he's getting the football, and they can't pass the ball, and Jalen Hurts is under the gun, and things turn around pretty well, right? And I'm not saying the Dolphins are going to have a Super Bowl turnaround this year or anything like that, but there's examples and instances year to year of you learn from your mistakes and you change and go about your business differently. And if you have the right players and the right people in, and I think that's why you see so many young players that have been brought in. One year, this team went from one of the oldest rosters in football to one of the top 6 youngest rosters in football. And it's going to get younger when Jalen Ramsey goes away. You're legitimately looking at, I believe, how many players over the age of 30 do the Dolphins even have on the roster right now? Now that Teron Armstead's been His retirement's been processed. The Dolphins are tied for 6th at 25.9 years of age is the average age of the roster. Players over the age of 30 on the Dolphins roster this year. Joe Cardona, long snapper, 33 years old. Pharaoh Brown, tight end, 1 year, $20,000 in guaranteed salary. No guarantee he makes the team, but a career role player, 31 years old. Jalen Ramsey, going to be out of here. Tyreek Hill, 31 years old. That's it for players over the age of 30. Well, there's some players that are 30, like Artie Burns and Elijah Campbell and Jonnu Smith and Jason Sanders, kicker. Zach Sealer this season will be 30. But it's really only a handful of players. This is going to be a young team, and it's the players that are the temperature setters being the Bradley Chubbs of the world. That's part of the incentive why you figure something out with Bradley Chubb. Shout out Bradley's wearing the orange jersey today at practice. Tua Tagovailoa, James Daniels being brought in as the marquee free agent selection, the Jordan Brookses of the world, the Zach Sealers of the world. You hear what the constant feedback is for the entirety of the draft class. Patrick Paul has been applauded at every step for not wasting his rookie season and knowing what's expected of him. And you got to walk the walk, right? And I get that. You know, it's very easy to talk the talk this time of year, but you got to walk the walk. But just like you looked at some of the philosophy things the team did last year, and I say, I have a horse in the race where I want the team to do as well as possible. I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong. I'm just trying to tell you what they're doing. This is that version of it for me this year. This is what they're trying to achieve. This is why they targeted the young players with the common thread intangibles that they have. This is why they are making personnel decisions that you maybe look at and say, we're not as talented of a football team as what we were before. This is what they're trying to achieve and how they're trying to achieve it. And if it goes well, this team's probably going to overachieve the average expectations. And if it doesn't go well, and you kind of have a blank slate opportunity where you can continue to offload a few more big contracts and the team can go wherever you want to go, regardless of who's building it. Hope that makes sense. Speaking of walking the walk versus talking the talk, I want to get into another thing that Tua Tagovailoa had to say. And we'll get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins, in addition to getting into some promising developments, some positive developments on an injury rehab front for the Dolphins this week at mandatory minicamp. So we're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. I want you to say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without all of the stress of everybody's schedules overlaying with each other. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars like Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders, all in one easy-to-see place. There's nothing worse than getting that text message midway through the day and being asked to pick the kid up from so-and-so or take the kid to swim or gymnastics or soccer or whatever else. And I've been in those shoes plenty of times, but Skylight can help take that chaos out of your day by making sure everybody starts every day on the same page, or in this case, on the same screen. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. Tua did the thing yesterday and talked about protecting himself and unnecessary hits, and he said the right things, which I appreciated. But it's one of those things for me where saying it doesn't really move the needle for me anymore, right? Tua had a big point of emphasis going into 23 of protecting himself and the jiu-jitsu and learning how to fall and adding the extra weight to his frame. He played 18 games. He led the league in passing yards, which is, we'll hang the banner, right? But it's a very good production. that they had as a passing offense. And when you see the drop off from Tua to the backup, I'd take 17 games. I wake up every morning right now, my head leaves the pillow. I'm hoping we get 17 games from Tua this year. Because if we get 17 games from Tua this year, I'd be willing to bet in the AFC, we probably get an 18th game if you get 17 games of Tua. But Tua was asked what the points of emphasis were protecting yourself better into the season. And he said, yeah, doing everything I can to stay available for the guys. Like I've said in the past before, nothing changes with that. It's knowing when is the time to give up on a play. I would say that longevity for me to be on the field with my guys is more important than whatever one play is. You have more quarters than there would be within just that one play. When I'm trying to show the guys that I'm competitive or whatnot. I know that they know that, but it's a nature thing. It just comes natural for me to compete in that sense. And that's just the thing I fight with every time. We need to walk the walk here, where if you don't walk the walk, and think about it, well, Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel in their post-game or their post-season presser talked about it's been really thrilling to see Tua and his evolution and how he's continued to stack wins into his game and how he plays the position. But he has to protect himself, and he has to control the controllables in that regard. And both of the hits that he took this year that led to him missing time were hits that came on avoidable plays and instances. We could have slid against Damar Hamlin down inside the red zone. And I understand you're trying to get a spark and make a play and be tough and all that, but you didn't have to take that contact the way that you did, and you could have got down and we could have protected ourselves. And he did that the second time they played the Bills. He had a similar instance play, and he got down and did the thing and protected himself. And then the play against Houston, you go back, you read the press conference the Wednesday after when he was asked about that play that he took the hit on the hip with, and he said, I could have got the ball down to Jonnu, but I was just trying to see if I can get it. He kind of smiled and shrugged. He said, competitive greatness. It is wanted to compete in that instance and try and make a play. It can't happen. Because if it happens again this year, it's not only Tua Tagovailoa's tenure as the franchise quarterback in Miami that's on the line, it's probably the jobs of the decision makers in place who are invested in you and trust you to be the player that's going to take this team where you want to go. And maybe you're a fan of the team that doesn't believe that Tua can take you there, and that's a whole other can of worms that I'm not really interested in getting into right now. But I will say, and if Tua has avoidable plays that he doesn't protect himself on and incurs more missed time as a result of those instances in 2025, this team's not going to overachieve expectations, and therefore they're not going to probably have a winning season. And then you're probably going to look at it again and ask yourself, what direction do we need to be going here, and who needs to be here to be a part of it? And the people who trust Tua Tagovailoa with their jobs are also on the line. This is the future of the franchise that's on the line. In perpetuity, in my opinion. Like, we can't regress here ever. And if you get hurt on a play inside a structure, it happens sometimes. Now, that's the unfortunate dynamics of the game. But trying to run people over and scrambling and not sliding and avoiding contact, you don't have the same luxury as other quarterbacks across the league in how you handle contact and how you throw your body around with reckless abandon. You got to be Peyton Manning in the pocket, feeling pressure and conceding a play. You got to be Tom Brady dirtballing, earthworming balls when you know the play's dead. And you're not going to pull a rabbit out of your rear end. And I think the thing that at least gives you a little bit of intrigue is you saw him do it in 23. He was playing with a supreme motivation to stay healthy and get a contract extension. He did it, right? And then he got the contract, and the focus became, I want to be more effective outside of structure. I want to slim down a little bit. I don't care what your playing weight ultimately is, as long as your decision-making to protect yourself is good. And the frame of mind needs to be on the long term and the future and the security of not just you, but those around you who have entrusted you with being the franchise, right? So I enjoyed hearing Tua say what he had to say, but it's just like everybody in this organization talking about culture change and how you approach every day and the tonality of the football team and being focused on football things. Like Mike McDaniel said today, the football organization has to be focused on football first and foremost and not be spending their time worrying about who's late to meetings and who's got this, that, the other thing going on that's not football related, and it's negatively affecting everybody's ability to do their jobs. You got to walk the walk. It's a walk the walk year. And we're going to find out for sure. Now, the Dolphins did get a couple of positive bits of news as it pertained to some injury rehabs. One was James Daniels. Team's big free agent signing was doing individual period work yesterday. It's the first time he was seen in his continued rehab from an Achilles tear early in the season in 2024. So that's a positive development for the Dolphins. And then Tyreek Hill for the first time catching footballs and not tennis balls. As he continues to rehab, he had a wrist procedure and then had some screws put in the wrist, and the screws were taken back out. So it was technically a second procedure, but it was part of the recovery plan. Everybody kind of freaked out when Tyreek was back with a picture with his wrist wrapped up again, but it was originally scheduled part of the plan. So it turns out all those crazy, wild conspiracy theories that Tyreek never got the first surgery, and this is a second surgery, and this is really the first one, and he's only getting out. Okay, yeah, whatever. I'm fed up with number 10 as much as anybody else, but come on, let's get serious. Catching footballs, almost 2 months out from the start of training camp. Mike McDaniel said that he's trying to push the envelope with his rehab process in a healthy way, which is good. And it sounds like he is on track to meet the Dolphins' expectation to be ready very early in training camp to be a full participant in presence and partaking in team drills. So some good news for the Dolphins on that front for two important players on the offensive side of the ball that seem to be cornerstones of the identity of who the offense can be in 2025. Beyond that, well, we'll see. But that's where we stand as we bring another episode of Locked On Dolphins to a close. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Wednesday. I will be back to talk to you all again soon. Go Fins. I'm out of here.